welcome to the live. Today I'm going to continue with David Mcgowan's Laurel Canyon book. I'm not sure if this is the weird scenes inside Laurel Canyon or if it's a precursor and the notes to the same book, but the information is relatively the same, and it's gonna get my point across. So, how's it going? That's coffee, and this is a cigarette. So we started off, just to recap quick, because this is basically the beginning. So to recap, Admiral George Stephen Morrison is the father to Jim Morrison, the lead singer of the Doors. Admiral George Stephen Morrison was the admiral on the Bay of Tonkin incident. He was like the head guy there calling the shots, which had proved to be just a bunch of shenanigans to get the U.S. to escalate ground troops, in the Vietnam conflict. So that's a kind of an interesting dynamic. The father is literally responsible for the Vietnam War, and the son is the golden god idol that is against the Vietnam War. So it's a little bit occultish, I would suppose. So let's continue. Oh yes, we also met Frank Zappa, who was the Pied Piper. And a little thing about Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa was one of my favorite musicians growing up. From the time I saw my drum teacher used to be a huge Frank Zappa fan. And one day he canceled a lesson. And I was wondering, and you mentioned he was going to a concert. And I'm like, who? Because I used to go to quite a few concerts when I was that age and in drum lessons. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to go see this guy Frank Zappa. He's pretty cool. He's a really good musician. The drummers are amazing, blah, blah, blah. He's rattling me off all these drummers, and I didn't know who they were at the time, and I do now. But, so he went to the concert, then the next week he brought me back some records to listen to, and we attempted to play some of them. If you know anything about Frank Zappa's music, it's very difficult to play. So let's read about this for a minute here, okay? Here we go. Okay, Frank Zappa, pro-war, authoritarian, and what else? During the early years of his heyday in Laurel Canyon's father figure is the rather eccentric personality known as Frank Zappa. Though he and his various Mothers of Invention lineups will never attain commercial success of the bands headed by the Admiral's son, Frank will be a hugely influential figure among his contemporaries. Ensconced in an abode dubbed the Log Cabin, which sits right in the heart of Laurel Canyon, at the crossroads of Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Lookout Mountain Avenue. Zappa will play host to virtually every musician who passes through the Laurel Canyon in the mid to late 60s. He will also discover, sign numerous acts to his various Laurel Canyon-based record labels. Many of these acts are rather bizarre and somewhat obscure characters. So there was Captain Beefheart, Larry Wildman Fisher, and some of them as psychedelic rocker, cum shock rocker Alice Cooper. So Zappa actually signed Alice Cooper to his first record deal. So Zappa, along with certain members of his sizable entourage, the Log Cabin was run as an early commune, with numerous hanger-ons occupying various rooms in the main house and the guest house, as well as in the peculiar caves and tunnels lacing the ground of the home. So the guy there's tunnels all over this guy's house, man. Like I said, he was one of my favorites. There's a picture of it. And a funny little thing, one of the guys at the shelter where I stayed before I came here actually partied with him in that log cabin. So, well, partied with the entourage, because Frank didn't really do a lot of drugs. Frank doesn't do drugs. Would you like some mushroom tea, Frank? Okay, far from the quaint homestead the name seems to imply. By the way, Log Cabin was a cavernous 5-level home that featured 2,000 plus square feet, living room with 3 massive chandeliers, an enormous floor-to-ceiling stone fireplace. Will also be instrumental in introducing the look and attitude that will define the hippie counterculture. So, although the Zappa crew preferred the label freak, nevertheless, Zappa, born curiously enough on the winter solstice of 1940, never really made a secret of the fact he had nothing but contempt for the hippie culture that he helped create and he surrounded himself with. Given that Zappa was, by numerous accounts, a pro-war, rigidly authoritarian control freak, it is perhaps not surprisingly that he would not feel a kinship with the youth movement that he had helped mature. And it's probably safe to say that Frank's dad also had little regard for the youth culture of the 1960s, given that Francis Zappa was, in case you were wondering, a chemical warfare specialist. Assigned to where else? The Edgewood Arsenal. Edgewood is, of course, the longtime home of America's chemical warfare program, as well as a facility frequently cited as being deeply immersed in MK Ultra operations. Curiously enough, Frank Zappa literally grew up at Edgewood Arsenal. So the guy grew up there, man. Having lived the first 7 years of his life in military housing on the grounds of the facility. The family later moved to Lancaster, California, near Edwards Air Force Base, where Francis Zappa continued to busy himself with doing classified work for the military intelligence complex. His son, meanwhile, prepped himself to become an icon of the peace and love crowd. Again, nothing unusual about that, I suppose. Zappa's manager, by the way, is a shadowy character by the name of Herb Cohen, who had come out to L.A. from the Bronx with his brother Mutt. Just a minute here. Just before the music and club scene began heating up, Cohen, a former U.S. Marine, had spent a few years traveling the world. Before his arrival at on the Laurel Canyon scene, those travels, curiously, had taken him to the Congo in 1961. At the very time, the leftist Prime Minister, Patrice Lombarda, was being tortured and killed by our very own EIA. Not to worry, though, according to one of Zappa's biographers, Cohen, he wasn't in the Congo on some kind of nefarious intelligence mission. No. He was there, believe it or not, to supply arms to Lombarda in defiance of the CIA. Because, that's the kind of thing that a globe-trotting ex-Marine did in those days. As well, soon enough, when we all take a look at another Laurel Canyon luminary. Making up the other half of the Laurel Canyon first family, it's Frank's wife, Gail Zappa, the copyright bitch. Known formerly as Adelaide Sloatman, Gail hails from the long-time career naval officers, including her father, who spent his life working on classified nuclear weapons research for the USA Navy. Gail herself had once worked as a secretary for the Office of Naval Research and Development. She also once told an interviewer that she had heard voices all her life. Many years before their nearly simultaneous arrival at Laurel Canyon, Gail had attended a naval kindergarten with Mr. Mojo Rising himself, Jim Morrison. It's claimed that as children, Gail once hit Jim over the head with a hammer. The very same Jim Morrison had later attended the same Alexandria, Virginia high school as two other future Laurel Canyon luminaries, John Phillips and Cass Elliott. Papa John Phillips. Wow, this guy is a fucking treat. Whoa. Okay, Papa John Phillips, more than probably any other illustrious resident of Laurel Canyon, will play a major role in spreading the emerging youth counterculture across America. His contribution will be twofold, okay? First, he'll co-organize along with Manson associate Terry Melcher and the famed Monterey Pop Festival. So he puts together the Monterey Pop Festival, which introduced LSD, which through unprecedented media exposure will give mainstream America its first real look at the music and fashion of the nascent hippie movement. Second, Phillips will pen an inspired song known as San Francisco. If you're going to San Francisco, be sure to wear those flowers in your hair. And it'll quickly rise to the top of the charts along with the Monterey Pop Festival. The song will be instrumental in luring the disenfranchised and a preponderance of whom were underage runaways to San Francisco to create the Haight-Ashbury phenomenon and the famed 1967 Summer of Love. So here's Joni Mitchell playing with Cass Elliott, Laurel Canyon Backyard, while David Crosby and Eric Clapton listen. So these people, they were all together and they all had parents that were involved in higher level things or well placed society parents. So, before arriving in Laurel Canyon and operating the doors of his home, before arriving in Laurel Canyon and operating the doors of his home to be soon to be famous, the already famous and the infamous, such as the aforementioned Charles Manson, whose family also spent time at the log cabin and at the Laurel Canyon home of Mama Cass Elliott, which case you didn't know sat right across the street from the Laurel Canyon home of Abigail Folger and Wojtek Frykowski. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. John Edmund Andrew Phillips was, shockingly enough, yet another child of the military intelligence complex. The son of U.S. Marine Corps Captain Claude Andrew Phillips and mother who claimed to have psychic and telekinetic powers. John attended a series of elite military prep schools in Washington, D.C. area, culminating in an appointment with the prestigious U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis. So these guys are not, they're not just a Cinderella story. You form a band and you make it. And, maybe you suck a little dick to get a record contract. It's a little deeper, guys. A little deeper. Okay. After leaving Annapolis, John married Susie Adams, a direct descendant of a founding father, John Adams. Susie's father, John Adams Jr., had been involved in what Susie described as cloak and dagger stuff with the Air Force in Vienna, or what we like to call covert intelligence operations. Susie herself would later find employment at the Pentagon, alongside John Phillips' older sister Rosie, who dutifully reported to work at the complex for nearly 30 years. Her mother, Dean Phillips, also worked for most of her life for the federal government in some unspecified capacity, and John's older brother, Tommy, was a battle-scarred former U.S. Marine who found work as a cop on the Alexandria police force. I'll bet one with a disciplinary record for exhibiting a violent streak when dealing with people with color. So his brother was a racist. John Phillips, of course, though surrounded throughout his life by military intelligence personnel, did not involve himself in such matters, or we are to believe. Before succeeding in his musical career, however, John did not seem to find himself quite innocently, of course, in some rather he didn't find himself innocently in some rather unusual places. One such place was Havana Club, Cuba, where Phillips arrived at the very height of the Cuban Revolution. For record, Phillips has claimed that he went to Havana as nothing more than a concerned private citizen with the intention of, you're going to love this one, fighting for Castro, because, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of folks in those days traveled abroad to thwart CIA operations before taking up residence in Laurel Canyon. You can't make this shit up, man. I'm just, and joining the hippie generation. During 2 weeks or so, the Cuban Missile Crisis played out. A few years after Castro took power, Phillips found himself cooling his heels in Jacksonville, Florida, alongside, coincidentally, I'm sure the Mayport Naval Station. So, anyways, let's say hi to everyone. How's it going, Tropical? Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Footprints. Yeah. Well, I'm actually just I found a book with pictures, so I'm just going to do this one. And then the History Channel, maybe I'll finish that one on that. But I just decided to do it on this one. What the fuck, just jump into it and do it. So, oh yeah, we went to the park. That's cool. Lemonade. How's it going? Sebastian Cruz. This is it's the history of the 60s music and how it was really controlled, just like the hip hop is controlled. That's why there was East versus West, and there's Crips and Bloods, and there's always a thing. How's it going, Bridget? Sweetie, how you doing? Steve, what's up? And Lemonade, always in there. So hey, JB, what's going on? So I'm just going to continue, guys. I'm just going to do, half hour, 40 minutes each night. I'm not the best reader, but it is practice, and so I'll just continue. Anyway, let's move on to another Laurel Canyon earliest and brightest stars, Mr. Stephen Stills. Will have the distinction of being the founding member of two of Laurel Canyon's most acclaimed and beloved bands, Buffalo Springfield, and needless to say, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. In addition, Stills will pen perhaps the first and certainly one of the most enduring anthems of the 60s generation, For What It's Worth, the opening lines of which appear at the top of this post. Stills' follow-up single will be entitled Bluebird, which is, coincidentally or not, happens to be the original code name assigned to MK Ultra program. Before his arrival in Laurel Canyon, Stephen Stills was the producer of yet another career military family raised, blah, blah, blah. Young Stephen spent large swaths of his childhood in El Salvador, Costa Rica, and Panama Canal Zone, and various other parts of Central America, alongside his father, who was, we can be fairly certain, helping to spread democracy to the unwashed masses in that endearingly American way. As the rest of our cast of characters, Stills was educated primarily at schools on military bases and at elite military academies. Along with his contemporaries in Laurel Canyon, he was widely viewed as having an abrasive, authoritarian personality. Nothing unusual about any of that, of course, as we've already seen with the rest of our cast of characters. There is, however, an even more curious aspect to Stephen Stills' story. Stephen will later tell anyone who will sit and listen that he served time for Uncle Sam in the jungles of Vietnam. And these tales will be universally dismissed by chroniclers of the era as nothing more than drug-induced delusions. Such things could possibly be true. It will be claimed, since Stills arrived on the Laurel Canyon scene at the very first time uniformed troops began shipping out, and will remain in the public eye thereafter, and it will, of course, be quite true that Stephen Stills could not have served with uniformed ground troops in Vietnam. But what will be ignored is the undeniable fact that U.S. had thousands of advisors, which is to say CIA Special Forces operatives, operating in the country for a good many years before the arrival of the first ground troops. See, because that's how they do it. They go in there, they go in there first with the agent provocateurs in the secret societies, man. That's how they do it. What will also be ignored is that given his background, his age, and the timeline of events, Stephen Stills not only could indeed have seen action in Vietnam, he would seem to have been a prime candidate for such an assignment, after which, of course, he could rather quickly become, stop me if you heard this before, an icon for the peace generation, man. How's it going, Jonathan? Mary. Another one of those icons, and one of Laurel Canyon's most flamboyant residents, is a young man by the name of David Crosby, founding member of the seminal Laurel Canyon band, the Byrds. As well, of course, Crosby, Stills, Nash. Crosby is not surprisingly the son of an Annapolis graduate and WW2 military intelligence officer, Major Floyd Denifield Crosby. Like others in this story, Floyd Crosby spent much of his post-service time traveling the world. Those travels landed him in places like Haiti, where he paid a visit in 1927, when the country just happened to be, coincidentally, of course, under military occupation by the U.S. Marines. One of the Marines doing that occupying was the guy we met earlier, in the name of Captain Claude Andrew Phillips. But David Crosby is much more than just the son of Major Floyd Delafield Crosby. David Van Corland Crosby, as it turns out, is a Sikon closely intertwined with the Van Corland, Van Shire, and Van Roosler families. And while you're probably thinking the Van Who families, I can assure you that if you plug those names over at Wikipedia, you can spend a pretty fair amount of time reading up on the power wielding by these clan for the last, 2.25 centuries. So this guy is from old fucking money. Big time old money. Run countries type fucking money. Alright, that's the kind of money this guy's come. Suffice to say, that is, the Crosby family tree includes a truly dizzying array of U.S. senators and congressmen, state senators and assemblymen, governors, mayors, judges, Supreme Court justices, Revolutionary, Civil War generals, signers of the Declaration of Independence, and members of the Continental Congress. It also includes, I should hasten to add, for those of you with a taste for such things, more than a few high-ranking Masons. Stephen Van Reichern III, for example, reportedly served as Grand Master of Masons for New York. And if this isn't impressive enough, according to the New England Genealogical Society, David Van Corland Crosby also is the direct descendant of Founding Fathers and Federalist Papers authors Alexander Hamilton and John Jay. If there is, as many believe, a network of elite families that has shaped nation and world events for a very long time, that it's probably safe to say that David Crosby is a bloodline member of that clan. Which may explain, come to think of it, why his semen seems to be in such demand in certain circles. Because, if we're being honest here, certainly can't be due to his looks, right? So, that was a reference to, what the fuck was her name? Melissa Etheridge. Melissa Etheridge and her girlfriend wanted to get his jizz. They wanted David Crosby's jizz for their love child. They wanted David Crosby's jizz for a love child, man. Telling you. David would, if America had royalty, then David would probably be a prince or a duke. Or something similar. not really sure how that shit works. But other than that, he's just a normal run-of-the-mill kind of guy who just happened to shine as one of Laurel Canyon's brightest stars. And who, I guess, I should add, has a real fondness for guns, especially handguns, which is to be maintained. He has a sizable collection for his entire life, according to those closest to him. It's a rare occasion when Mr. Crosby is not packing heat. John Phillips also owned and sometimes carried handguns. And according to Crosby himself, he has on at least one occasion discharged a firearm in anger at another human being. All of which made him, of course, an obvious choice to be a flower child. Another shining star in the Laurel Canyon scene just a few years later will be a singer-songwriter Jackson Browne. Are you getting as bored as this as I am? The product of a career military family. Browne's father was assigned to post-war reconstruction work in Germany, which very likely means he was to employ the OSS precursor to the CIA. As readers of my Understanding the F Word may recall, U.S. involvement in post-war reconstruction in Germany largely consisted of maintaining as much infrastructure as possible while shielding war criminals from capture and prosecution. Against the backdrop, Jackson Browne was born in a military hospital in Heidelberg, Germany. Some 2 decades later, he emerged as, oh, never mind. Let's talk instead about 3 other Laurel Canyon vocalists who will rise to dizzying heights of fame and fortune. Gary Buckley, Dan Peake, and Dewey Bunnell. Individually, these names are probably unknown virtually to all readers, but collectively as the band America. Oh, okay. The 3 will score huge hits in the 70s with songs such as Ventura Highway, A Horse with No Name, and the Wizard of Oz theme, The Tin Man. Okay, so this is one thing you guys all have to realize, that during these times, when these bands were going in to record these records, these hit records that were broadcast and changed culture, they didn't write it. They were written by studio musicians. You know that the beat goes on, the bass line to that. It was written by the funkiest bass player I ever seen, and she's a 60-year-old lady. It's a song. It's probably a little over your head there, Lemonade. I think this is a little before your time, but it's proving how entrenched. That's why it's called television program. Because you're being programmed. It's that simple. So we're just going to go on for a little bit, and because reading is fundamental. Yeah, it's a song. So we could also, I suppose, discuss Mike Nesmith of the Monkees, Corey Wells of Three Dog Night, 2 more hugely successful Laurel Canyon bands who both arrived in LA not long after serving time with U.S. Air Force. Nesmith also inherited a family fortune estimated at $25 million. Wow. I didn't know that. No, they didn't, but they got paid very well. And they had their little clique. They kept their, it was like their little secret. So there's like this thing within it's called Duper's Delight, and it's like they're in on the secret, and plus, you know, they're getting paid well, and they're not, you know, what's his name, Bernard? There's a drummer that came out and told about drumming on some of the Beatles tracks. Bernard Purdy, his name was, and it's slowly coming out. But there's a documentary called The Wrecking Crew, and I suggest when I finish here in a couple of minutes, you find it. It's on YouTube, and it's only about $3, but it'll explain everything. It's absolutely brilliant. I tried to show it, but I got a copyright, and they froze the account or whatever, right? You know, I'm still learning this YouTube shit. But yeah, it was The Wrecking Crew. Great movie. It'll just show you exactly how the mold is. And then there's another one called Hired Guns, and that goes a little closer into the 80s, and it shows about the guitar work from different guitar players. And I mean, some bands did play their instruments, like Led Zeppelin did, and a few others, but those guys also played on, they were actually studio musicians who took their own shit on the road. So there's like it's kind of a mixed little club, but most of them didn't. They did play live, but even some of them didn't do that. They had whole bands behind the curtains, you know, just like the Wizard of Oz, right? So the Byrds, before fronting the Flying Burrito Brothers, was the son of Major Cecil Ingram Coon Dog Connor II, a decorated military officer and bomber pilot who reportedly flew over 50 combat missions. Parsons was also the heir on his mother's side to the farmable Snively family fortune, said to be the wealthiest family in the executive enclave of Winter Haven, Florida. The Snively family was proud owner of Snively Groves Incorporated, which reportedly owned as much as 1/3 of the citrus groves in Florida. I can't write. Oops, oh no. Damn it. Let me see if I can get this back. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I can't, like, I'm a drummer, so I play by rhythm and that, and the music, like the music I make on here, I'm just putting loops together, like, so, but I do change the keys and stuff like that, you know, but, yeah, I'm learning a whole lot, you know what I mean, but, I think probably writing your own is better, because some of it, I mean, like, I listen to mostly my own stuff. I do listen to other music, and I do listen to the old music that I used to like, but for the most part, like, when I'm just sitting here now, I've got beats that I've programmed and loops that I've programmed, and I got them on Launchpad systems, so I can change the beat up while I'm talking to you guys. See? And I can do that physically, like it's a physical pad. But I also got it running through the computer. And then I've got other ones on other devices. Oh yeah, good. Yeah, well they're doing it like Danny would be doing it more with a guitar and doing that. I mean, I know a couple chords, but I'm out of practice. I don't practice it enough. I just don't. I've been just like I'm more into the production of it. It's, to me, it's faster results, kind of like I can get the drums, bass, put everything on there. They're just, but it's like putting together a puzzle, kind of. That's how I see it. That's what I like to do. So yeah, let's just finish this page, guys, and Then I'll do another one tomorrow. We'll just bang it off here. So it goes on as one scrolls through the roster of Laurel Canyon superstars. What one finds far more than not are the sons and daughters of the military intelligence complex, and the sons and daughters of extreme wealth and privilege. And oftentimes you'll find both rolled into one convenient package. Every once in a while, you will also stumble across a former child actor, like the aforementioned Brandon DeWild or Monkey Mickey Dolenz or eccentric prodigy Van Dyke Parks. You also encounter some formal mental patients, such as James Taylor, who spent some time in 2 different mental institutions in Massachusetts before hitting the Laurel Canyon scene, or Larry Wildman Fisher, who was institutionalized repeatedly during his 10 years, once for attacking his mother with a knife, an act that was gleefully mocked by Zappa on the cover of Fisher's first album. Finally, you might find the offspring of an organized crime figure like Warren Zevon, son of William Stumpy Zevon, a lieutenant, and the infamous LA crime lord Mickey Cohen. So, wow. It would, of course, make sense these days from an aspiring musician to venture out to Los Angeles. But in those days, the center of the music universe was Nashville, Memphis, and New York. There wasn't any industry that drew the Laurel Canyon crowd, you see, but rather Laurel Canyon crowd that transformed Los Angeles into the epicenter of the music industry. To what, then, do we attribute this unprecedented gathering of future musical superstars in the hills above Los Angeles? What was it that inspired them all to head out west? Perhaps Neil Young said it best when he told an interviewer that he couldn't really say why he headed out to LA circa 1966. He and others were just going out like lemmings. Yeah. So what he's saying there is Laurel Canyon, the whole hippie scene was started first in Laurel Canyon. All the people in Laurel Canyon that have been propelled into fame have family that is either high Mason, super elite, wealthy people, high top secret clearance military people, war heroes, and then their sons and daughters all went to the same schools. They all showed up in this one little place. This is like go look up Laurel Canyon on the Google Maps. I should pull it up. But it's not too big. And all these rock stars ended up there. There was a military base right there. On this military base, they made chemical weapons and they made filmmaking. They had more filmmaking equipment than Disney or Universal Studios at this military base. So it's pretty compelling. Will be continued tomorrow. But as you can see, how did they all get there? Not to mention, there's tunnels. Frank Zappa's house has tunnels. It gets deeper, there's more tunnels. Yeah. No, it's all still there now. It's just, it's not like you have your big Satan party out in the open, Lemonade. You know, it's invite only. You get a tap on the shoulder, or you get an invitation written backwards in blood. For fuck's sakes, man. You know what I mean? Like, you go. This is as they say, the party, right? You go into the party, and then it's in the back room or underneath, or you know, and that's how they get everywhere. They got these tunnels going. Just wait. The rest of the book is. I think this is the Cole's notes of the actual book, but it had pictures, so I wanted to give you guys a better reference to look at too, right? Instead of just reading. So I'll see you guys tomorrow, probably same time. Yeah, we'll just pile through this book and get her done. And we can go into some deeper shit if you're interested, and if I still like reading. I usually let the computer read it and I just watch, but I'm trying to stimulate my brain. So thanks, guys. Good night.